All right, so last chapter, first of all, pardon me. First of all, pardon me, because last chapter ended on an accidental cliffhanger. Like, didn't try to end the video, it just sort of, my phone storage was full, and so the video stopped by itself, and I was really late for something, and I didn't have time to finish it. And also I thought that was a good point of reflection, that had maybe that stoppage I could take as an opportunity to reflect and think, well, maybe trying to adhere very closely to a specific 20-minute time constraint is a bad idea if I feel too rushed in my attempts to articulate what happens in that time frame. I do like the notion of having a restricted time window, but I also think that this is going to be a while, so it's worth figuring out, and I think the best way to do so is through a process of experimentation. So that's my intention moving forward. It might not be 20 minutes, I'll see how long it is, and then over the course of time I'll pare it down to a specific... Actually, we'll see if I even want to do that. But for now, I'm not going to be too rushed in my attempt to 20 minutes it. And so when we last left off, we were articulating the tension with Ganya in the middle of it, as with respect to the marriage of him and Nastasia Filipovna. On one hand, we had his mom and his family who had very disapproving opinions of the potential marriage, and on the other, we had General Yupanchin, who was trying to push him into the marriage. And Ganya was feeling the tension from both sides. He was being pulled from both sides, and that's not to speak of his own internal perspective whatsoever. So he's in this position where he's really being pulled, and that's an uncomfortable way, of course, to embark on a marriage. And so he wasn't reacting very well in conversation with the general, and the general was being frustrated at him, but and kind of blew over with frustration towards him. Well, if you don't have to do this, but you keep saying you want it, so here it is. She's gonna decide tonight. And so that's making him nervous because it's all coming so fast, and he hasn't had the adequate time to figure out. I feel like they haven't actually met that much even. Well, no, I feel like they've met. He's under pressure and hasn't developed his own perspective to the degree he wants to in order to feel safe in such a lifelong decision. Anyways, so that's all happening. That blows over, the general yells at him, and then he kind of hangs his head in shame and tells him, yes, he does want to marry her, but that's all he says. But there's obviously more feelings under the surface. Anyway, at this time, the prince finishes, and this is still the end of last chapter, we're just recapping. The prince finishes his calligraphy, and the general is very impressed by it and starts asking him questions, and the prince is answering questions about these flourishes, the history and the different forms, the history of the different forms as well of calligraphy, whether it be through abbots or Russian war offices. The prince is kind of really into this, and the general is like, whoa, that's so impressive, isn't it, Ganya? And Ganya's still kind of pissed off, and he's like, yeah, and he knows it, he knows he's, yeah, whatever. And so the general's kind of like, oh, don't be that way. And the prince still has nowhere to go. And the general's like, you know what? You should stay at Ganya's house. They have a room for rent. And meanwhile, know that Ganya's family is in a significant amount of turmoil. But they do rent out rooms, so it's okay, that does make sense. But this is kind of Ganya didn't make this decision, the general did. And he's like, you wouldn't have a problem with that, would you, Ganya? And Ganya's like, no, my mom would love that. So much of his life is being decided by this guy who's strong-arming him because he's his boss, because he's an authority figure. But that's what it is right now. So the general leaves, and any semblance of positive expression that Ganya still had on his face drops, and the prince recognizes it and sees him as altogether miserable, and so he doesn't really engage with Ganya. But Ganya, the prince had noticed that when they were talking about Nastasia Filipovna, the prince had brought up that Rogozhin also had the intention of trying to marry Nastasia Filipovna. And so it's like, oh, this young merchant who has 1 million of rubles. Whoa, what competition for you, Ganya. But Ganya almost seems glad at it. Maybe it's like something taken off. Like, I was being forced into this anyways. I don't really, if he came in, and that would be good for me. And then Ganya as well, once the general leaves, asks the prince if he would fancy Nastasia. And the prince says she's beautiful, but that he's actually an invalid as a result of his 4 years of rampant seizures and epilepsy, for which he was sent to Switzerland. And so he can't marry. Interesting fact. Anyways, that's the end of the chapter. The general goes to meet his family, his wife and 3 daughters, for their midday lunch, and invites the prince to come along as well, but the prince is to be introduced, so he's to come at a later time. The general is going to go in, sort of soft launch the prince, and the prince is going to come in as well. And it's noted that the general has specific reasons and motivations for taking such a liking to the prince. But we don't know that until the start of this chapter that we're going to be discussing today. I'm going to leave like a couple seconds of break in case I want to cut between these episodes, but that's the end of the last chapter. And chapter 4 now, we enter the dining hall of the Yapanchin's mansion, and in it is the typical affair, which is the 3 daughters and the mom always get together for their midday lunch, which is almost as good as a dinner. They have their whole spread, they hang out there, they eat, and the general joins them when he can. But there has been a lot of tension in the air lately, and we'll get to that. But there's been a lot of tension in the air lately, and so the general is trying to avoid his wife. The general is trying to avoid his wife and daughters because he's terrified of them. He's scared of his wife. He's pretty scared of her. She's like, she's kind of got him under her thumb a little bit, which is funny because he's like he's this guy out in the world who's like, he's got Ganya under his thumb, but he's got a lot of people under his thumb. He's got estates and businesses, and he's a powerful man, but he's so scared of his wife. And so Prince Mishkin is kind of like a distraction. And specifically today, the day of Nastasia Filipovna's birthday, the day where she's going to decide who to marry, specifically today he wants to avoid his wife, because presumably tomorrow, once that decision has been made, things will be easier for reasons we will sort of get to. It's messy. It's all messy. It's all pretty messy. It ties itself together over time, but it's like libraries of strings that eventually get woven together, but you lose them all, and then they pop back up, and you're like, oh, maybe you remember, maybe you don't. Anyway, so we enter, and before the general comes in, we get a quick description of the 3 daughters. The author's like, oh, the 3 Yapanchin daughters are healthy and beautiful, of like with strong shoulders or healthy shoulders and busts, and long arms with strong, almost masculine hands. Which is like, buddy, that's a really specific description, but like, I kind of know the build you're talking about. Shout out to, I mean, well, it was just weird because that's specific, but okay. And so That's how the chapter opens. Literally, that sentence is how the chapter opens. It's not just a random sentence I'm plucking out of the pages. But I thought that was interesting. He's so specific in the way he describes people. And so then the general comes in, and there's a strong tension in the air due to some events that we have not heard about yet. We've heard about their products, but we don't know about any of the processes. So basically at this point, we are going to take a detour to find out exactly why the general's wife, Miss Yapanchin, the last known relative of Prince Mishkin, why she's so mad at her husband right now. And actually, we aren't going to find out, but we're going to find out. We're just going to go back in time, 18 years, in fact. So the general Yapanchin has a business partner. Now, before we go back 18 years, the general Yapanchin has a business partner named Afanasy something Totsky. And so Afanasy Totsky is a business partner of his and has recently declared in recent months that he wants to get married. He is at the bachelor marriage eligible age of 55, just like the general. So, okay, but he is looking to get married, and he wants a good marriage, like into a good family. He's a man of a great deal of wealth. Like, he's a very wealthy businessman. He's a business partner in, I think, multiple ventures of General Yapanchin, but he asks for the general's advice because he wants to marry one of his three daughters who are 20 to 25 years old. The youngest, Aglaya, is 20, and the oldest, Alexandra, I believe, is 25. Aglaya, the youngest one, is the beauty of the family, and all three daughters are super tight, by the way. They are kind of, power-wise, there's kind of a mutiny going on between them and their mother, who is, it's always her word that goes, but like lately the three of them have been uniting and usurping her, and it's really irritating her, but she is just taking it out on her husband. So the story goes in the book. So he's been really walking on eggshells lately, and that's only one of the factors that causes this eggshell walking. The three girls are so tight, and that's important to articulate, because their togetherness is like, the two older ones have decided that they will do whatever is in their power to get Aglaya the best marriage. Her future is not to only be of a good quality marriage, but they want her, she's so beautiful, they want her to live out everyone's fantasy. She's beautiful, she's in a good family, and so they want her to live out this fantasy life with a man of all good values, not to mention a high, what I forget what they called it, bride price, dowry, like a high fortune, but also you pay the family of the wife's family. Anyways, that leads to Afanasy Totsky, who can offer a very high bride price. That's not the word, but for Alexandra, the oldest. He knows Aglaya is out of his league. 20 and 25-year-olds, 50, whatever. He knows Aglaya is out of his league, but General Yapanchin and his wife think that probably Alexandra would accept a marriage proposal from him. And so General Yapanchin's really trying to make this happen. And that sets off his wife for specific reasons. I think she has trust issues with Afanasy Totsky, and the basis for those trust issues goes back 18 years. So 18 years ago, Trotsky was, at this time, he was living abroad, probably more in like the Parises and probably in France, Spain, like Italy, in that very those very western reaches of Europe in comparison to Russia. But he had come back to check on his estates, and at a neighbor of one of his estates was a very unfortunate man, and I forget his name, but a very unfortunate man who one day was going to the creditor's office in town, and his servant caught up to him and told him that his house burned down and his wife died, and his 2 little girls of 7 and 8 years old were still alive, but he had had an entire life of misfortune, but this was too much for him, and he himself went insane and passed away. So there were just these 2 little girls left, and one of them died of whooping cough. So there's this little 8-year-old girl who's left an orphan, and Trotsky is, out of the kindness of his heart, sends her to be educated. There are already people in the area being educated at his expense, and so he sends her to be with them. And then he moves back away because he was living abroad at that time. And so he continues living abroad and sort of forgets about the whole situation for another 5 years. Now, 5 years later, this girl is 12, and he comes back to check on his estates and notices, wow, she's really beautiful. And she's 12. And he's got to be in his 40s. And from this point on, he gets her a private tutor, moves her to a different estate across Russia to one of the different provinces. Presumably she knows nobody there. And instead of visiting once every 5 years now he spends like 3 months a year there. So, and he is touted as this man of great taste and a great recognizer of beauty. And so he's now spending 3 months a year in this place where, just because this 12-year-old girl is there. And that's weird. Obviously, that's weird. It sounds like the story, this chapter, feels like it's spoken from the voice of Trotsky in one of his meetings of when he's getting General Yaponchin to consult him on potentially marrying his daughter. It sounds like this is a story that Afanasy Trotsky is telling General Yaponchin to justify himself so that he doesn't sound bad. And this is like his story, on his perspective on the matter, so that he doesn't sound bad or something. And so this goes on for a while, from the time where she's 12 to the time where she's 20, and she's just getting more and more beautiful. And that feels gross to say, but I'm just saying this is what happens in the book. Obviously, whatever. And so from his perspective, it's when he has the intention to set out and find someone to marry that she comes all the way from the provinces to his place in Petersburg and decides, hey, I don't care who you're going to marry, but whoever it is, I promise I'm going to destroy it. And he said, and who's to say why? And who's to say why? Who's to say why she would do such a thing? And then, so he at first wants to marry her off to someone in a faraway province, some nobleman way out where he'll never have to deal with her again or see her again. But she rejects that possibility, and so he instead moves her to St. Petersburg alongside him, I guess. I think she lives with him in St. Petersburg from her ages of 20 to 25. And at first he thought she was jealous. She knew he made this declaration that he wants to marry. He thought she was trying to ruin it out of jealousy. But then one day he's like, well, what if I offered to marry you? Like, what if I offered to marry you? And she laughs in his face. And he's a prideful man. He is a noted egotist of the highest degree. So that's I'm pretty sure that's like what is said of him. He's a noted egotist of the highest degree. And so this, I think, really gets to him, that this girl who he finds really beautiful is A, gonna ruin any chance of marriage or any attempt at marriage he has, but B, when he tried to marry her, she laughed in his face and told him no, and told him that she has nothing but contempt for him and hates him and is disgusted by this dude. And so he's basically makes the case, maybe to General Yapanchin, that, oh, it's as if she has withered and all her notions of passion and goodness have dried up and died within her. And she's just a cold, evil witch of a person now. It's like, okay. Like, I'm not, like, just, that's kind of like where he's coming from in terms of like talking about, like, in terms of his justification. That's how strongly he is justifying why she hates him so much and why she wants to ruin his life. Anyways, she wants to ruin his life, right? And so, but the general and the general and Trotsky, eventually sort of have been putting their heads together and come up with their pals, and they're like, oh, well, we can promote a husband to her, and we can get her to know him, and we can make this whole, because Trotsky isn't going to do anything until Nastasia Filipovna is married. Like, she couldn't even say, there's nothing she could say. Then the matter is settled. I feel like then there's no chance of her saying anything about him if she's married. I think that's I think that's like, if she gets married, then I'm safe. But until she gets married, I'm not safe. And so they put their heads together and scheme to find her a husband. Ganya is their promoted bachelor, so that he might be her husband. And Trotsky, he's like, oh, by the way, I'm going to give 75,000 rubles to you, Nastasia Filipovna, as your like bride price. Whoever marries you is going to get this 75,000 rubles, which I think is pretty significant, like really significant. And he makes it clear, he's like, and now no, this was going to be in your will, in my will to you anyways, and know that this is, I think he said it was like, this is just a payment for recognition of your ruined life, but this is in no way like me recompensating for wrongdoing. Know that. That's not what I'm doing here. I was going to give you this anyways. He sure is generous for someone who had no involvement in this girl's life, and when she was 7 to 12, never saw her and forgot about her, but then came back and saw, and when she was 12, he's like, she's gonna be beautiful, and then he spends 3 months of the year, every year, with her, and moves her away from everyone she knows. So they're scheming to get Ganya to be the guy. the fall guy, basically. And Nastasia Filipovna eventually they're introducing the two of them, and Nastasia Filipovna eventually is like, yeah, Ganya seems like a nice guy, but I've heard his parents don't like me, or I don't know if his parents like me. I would like to get to know them. I want to see if I hear his mother and sister are really nice people. I want to get to know them, and I don't want to be pushed into this. I want to be able to make my own decision here. And I don't know Ganya well enough. I respect that he works and provides for his family, and he seems like a nice guy, but I don't know. And she also says, okay, I'll accept this 75,000 rubles, but maybe she's the one who, she says that she still wants Ganya to know about whatever happened between her and Totsky and the nature of her and Totsky's relationship. And it's never mentioned. That's about as clearly as Totsky uses very evasive language in describing why she's so motivated to stop him in the first place. But I mean, it feels to me like the writing's on the wall. We don't know. We don't know the facts, and we just don't. So she wants Ganya to know the nature of her and Totsky's relationship, and she gets very excited, and she accepts that maybe things can be left in the past, and that she might not get love in her life, but she might be able to have a family life and have children. That's her ambition, but as a whole, I don't know. None of it is or isn't worked out, but the two men who are allied at this point in time, the general and Totsky, feel as though they're coming to resolution this evening when they've convinced her to make her decision on her 25th birthday tonight. So that whole story, I think, triggers suspicion in Miss Yapanchin. Maybe she doesn't want to marry her daughter off to this guy, but her husband is like trying to scheme it up so that happens. And so, that's me reading into it a little bit, but that's what I'm working with. And so she doesn't like him very much right now. She does not like him very much right now. And if he had been even a second late to lunch today, she would have called for him, gotten one of the servants to go and let him know that she was waiting. So he wanted to call out on business, be like, hey, I can't come, business. She would have known he's lying. But instead, he found Prince Mishkin. And it's like, hey, the last of your line. Do you want to know this guy? But she's so heated. She's so heated at her husband. And he basically sees Prince Mishkin as this grenade that he can throw into the fray of his family life, so that he can evade for one more day, and that hopefully everything will be better tomorrow once Nastasia decides.